Hi, everybody. I am in a position where I am preparing for Sell Your Body show to be moved online. So we'll be publishing a video that I'm editing. It'll be on the secret group Facebook page on May 9th. And that's not really important for what I'm about to talk about. But in doing that and in editing and producing and compiling in that show, I'm working a little bit with people that do improv, and I've been improvising a little bit, which is something that I do love to do. And I know that our comics and our improvisers are really missing the stage right now. And as we move to online entertainment during social distancing, I wanted to provide a few tips about how you can create an improvised space online that's fun, not confusing, entertaining for the audience, and some kind of effective improvising tips for when you're doing things over video. I've been primarily using Zoom. I heard that they're mining and selling our data, just like a lot of different entities. My preference is for it just because it's what I have, but you can use any video conferencing that you feel comfortable with, get a group of people together or even just one-on-one, and improvise. And so I've been designing some improv games, which I normally do for Sell Your Body show. Those have an audience element to them. Some of the stuff that I'm doing doesn't have any audience participation. It's just people hanging out, improvising scenes over these calls. And so I have a few tips for improvisers if they would like to move some of their work online. And then if you're an improv teacher, this might be really useful for you to bring to your students as well, if you want to continue practice over conference calls. And so, the number one problem with conference calls is crosstalk. And so the first tip that I have is to try to limit crosstalk as much as possible. We have a barrier with online improvising, which is that timing can be really rough and there can be a delay and a lag. Sometimes, like with Zoom, if two people are talking at once, it might mute one. Or if a sound is like too close to another sound, you might not catch the sound. And so what you will have to do as an improviser is adapt to that. And so adapting to the likelihood of crosstalk and adapting to the likelihood of sounds not really coming through. Oh, cool. There's a spider right there. I'm going to let it live and just ignore it, but that's where my eyes are going to be sometimes because it's very close. So think about media that already integrates online communication. So things like radio hosts, conference calls for workplaces, video chats with your friends. Anytime that you've ever been on a webcam with a person, these are experiences that we can pull from to create scenes. And so, your skill as an improviser is to kind of set the scene through dialogue and action. And we don't really have as much room for like pantomiming props and stuff. And so some of what we'll have to do is very dialogue heavy to set the scene for, okay, I've been at summer camp for a month and my friend didn't get to come with me. And now we're on this little chat together. And so that's us setting up a kind of webcam friendly improv scene. And I'm sure that there are millions that you can pull from. You could even maybe ask the audience, what ways they've used a webcam before, and that could even play into a suggestion. So understanding the implications of media and kind of adapting to that are going to be really useful when you're improvising. And then the second issue that you can, or not the second issue, but the second solution that we have to crosstalk is that it's kind of difficult to understand when someone's about to say something unless you provide really overt cues yourself, and then you expect really overt cues of others. So, in our daily life, we're not like raising our hand a lot, but we've all seen people that are in, a group of people at a bar that are kind of like, they're sort of like saying things, or like maybe they have like this like lean in when they're about to talk. And when we're improvising on stage, we do experience a lot of that too, right? There is kind of like I have something to say and here's what I'm going to do with my body language. But in much this, like, when you're on stage, let's say like you're in a huge theater and we get the suggestion to play to the last row, right? So we have to adapt to that as actors by projecting our voice, overusing our limbs, creating expressions with our face that are impossible to miss. The things that we do on stage, those are adaptations to the medium, right? It's not like film where it's right up on you most of the time and we can edit to make scenarios happen. We have to make them happen ourselves. And so if we compare the concept of adapting to the stage to adapting to online, we also have to create physical cues, adapt to physical body language so that we know that we're about to talk. One that I've really been enjoying is just like getting closer to the camera and kind of like opening my mouth a little bit, like I'm about to say something. And with the lighting right now, that looks kind of spooky. So maybe it's a scene about a campfire. But all of those physical cues are going to come to you as you practice, and they're going to become a part of how you're conducting your scenes. And so if you kind of make a conscious decision when you're developing your character or when your character is kind of coming through you, to decide what your physical flag is, like the I'm about to speak flag. And then your team members that are improvising with you will start to either consciously or unconsciously, maybe consciously if they watch this video, they'll start to understand like where your body is when you kind of want to talk. And then, it's their responsibility as your team members and your little improv family to honor that. And then kind of like, section 2, part B, is that there is, if you're in a group setting, the opportunity for there to be a facilitator character. And so whereas you might not think about, the role that your character plays in facilitating a scene on stage, there is sometimes kind of like the leader or the straight man or someone whose behavior is really kind of observing and guiding the behavior on stage. And I think that there could probably be more than one. But think about when you're in your scenes, characters that you can pull on that are kind of, policing how often people are talking as in a way that's kind of integrative with the scene, and or who is, really noticing that some people have been raising their hand in class, and I don't really feel like the teacher has been respecting that. Things like that, where you can kind of point out places where you saw it, and sort of integrate, observing visual cues as part of the scene so that we're not really leaving anyone behind in the collaborative, right? I think it would be super useful to like notice that someone's camera is laggy instead of kind of moving on as if it's not. Or, in Zoom, you have the option to sort of type chat. And so you could even have characters or people that are utilizing that, and then the responsibility is on the other person to read it out loud, right? Or read it out loud incorrectly, or you could pretend to send messages for time. So stuff like that will help prevent crosstalk. So I call that listening with your eyes. Because if you listen with your eyes, then you'll be able to notice in the same way that you would kind of just be aware of your environment in stage, you're aware of your environment as well in the calls that you're on and in the scenes that you're on. And part of that environment is how people are acting at their webcam. And then, yes and is like more important than ever right now. If you're doing stuff online, like, I think like improvisers probably know that the idea is to be cooperative, but we can really get away with not always honoring that when we're on stage. We can kind of get away with creating a conflict, and particularly like in 2-person scenes, we can kind of like really, really heavy hit the misunderstandings or the arguments. And when it comes to doing stuff online, you have less of people's attention span, and so that means that the amount of time that they're willing to endure an argument or a conflict or a misunderstanding is a lot shorter. And then maybe it's really not even that short when they're in, or really that long when they're in the audience. Maybe they just can't get up and walk out, right? But when you're doing stuff online, like if you're doing a stream or a video, they can very easily get up and walk out. And so really, really pull on the core value of yes and as much as you can to create something that's entertaining and not frustrating. And then, don't really put it on yourself to be creating the conflict, because conflicts will arise. And really the only conflict is agreeing. So if you can create a conflict by agreeing, then you're producing humor. If you can create a conflict by failing to notice things, you're producing humor. So try to create as much texture as you can without having to pull on stuff like anger and headbutting and disagreement. Because we don't really have the luxury of bringing it back as much when we're doing stuff online. So those are the tips that I have for improvising in the age of the quarantined internet. If you have any questions or suggestions, please drop them in the comments below. I'll probably be creating content about how to create content while we're in this quarantine, since I'm moving that way and I'm in the middle of producing a show. I'm stumbling upon a lot of really valuable lessons in that. And I think that even after social distancing is not a factor, we will be moving towards creating things online a lot more using these lessons. So I think it's valuable either way. To learn and to train in such a way that you're kind of adapting to the way that society is functioning around you, but also, how people are consuming entertainment. All right. I'm sending lots of love.